So as I alluded to before, the last week has been a spectacular week in Edmonton area sports. Because not only are your Edmonton Oilers once again the NHL Western Conference champions, but the Edmonton Eskimos are back, in a sense. Okay, let's not jump the gun a little bit too much. So, as sure that a lot of people know, over the past few months, there's been a change in the leadership. There's been a change in ownership at the Edmonton Football Club organization, the club currently known as the Edmonton Elks. And that happened with a lot of controversy, and honestly, rightfully so. There were thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people that over a history of at least close to, if not at least 70 years, had supported that team through absolutely everything. And then over a period of time, there was this campaign that was started, not even by, definitely not by the Inuit, and definitely not by people in Edmonton, largely people far and away outside of Edmonton. And basically what they wanted to do was they wanted to change the name of the team because they said that the name of the team was a racial slur, which very much depends on who you ask. And it actually even depends on when you ask. Because there is an argument that is made by some that the word Eskimo translates as he eats it raw. Wasn't actually so. But there was a group of people in Canada that did use that argument, and guess what? They were not white Europeans, people that used that definition. When you actually go back through like all of the old writings and everything that were done by early European explorers in Canada, the earliest translation of the word Eskimo to a European language, it's a translation into French, and it basically said, "He who lives where it's cold." And then over a period of time, there were, say, other First Nations that were basically saying, it's like, no, it means raw meat eater, and we don't like them so much because racism did not actually arrive in North America with, with the first white Europeans. It had been here for generations. It had been here literally as long as people had been here. And you look at what if you look at what a lot of these First Nations had done to their fellow First Nations for generations before the white Europeans ever turned up, yeah, that was not really a new thing. It had been going on for generations. And so there were all these people that were kind of coming out, and they were pushing this idea that, the team, the Edmonton Eskimos, they have to change their name because it's a racial slur and it means raw meat eater. And it turned out to be the case that in no small measure, a lot of the people that were pushing that were actually descendants of the people that had originated that that had originally used that as a slur. And meanwhile, the rest of us haven't used that as a slur maybe ever, but definitely not for more than 100 years. I mean, the line, "Have yourself a merry little Christmas," or it's that Christmas Carol, but there's the line, "Folks dressed up like Eskimos." I'm having a bit of a brain fart right now, and I can't think of the exact title of that song. But I guarantee you that nobody had raw meat eater in mind when they wrote or sang that lyric for hundreds of years. So this whole thing, it was a farce. And it wasn't even really being initiated or pushed by Inuit people. When that franchise went up north and they were doing their outreach with communities up there, they were also doing a lot of polling in that area. And they basically found that, like, with the exception of like one region, like I think with the exception of like northern Quebec, like far northern Quebec, everywhere else, the Inuit were like, according to the polls, the Inuit were like, yeah, keep the name. Like, yeah, we like it. But there was kind of this campaign to really start to get the corporate money behind forcing a name change, and then eventually, I think it was Intact Insurance said that they would stop sponsoring the team if they didn't change the name, and then suddenly the team ownership, the team management, at that point the team was still community owned. But at that point, the team management was like, okay, well, we better change the name to make the corporate guys happy. And so the next thing you know, the team doesn't have a name anymore. And then next thing you know, they kind of roll out this whole, let's name the team thing. Let's get ideas from the fans. And then they come back and they tell the fans, it's like, no, you can't have this or this or this because it offends, you know, this group of people over here, really for no good reason. But, and then you end up with the Edmonton Elks. And then you ended up with 5 years of empty stadiums. And you ended up with 5 years of disaffected fans. And no end to that in sight. I mean, unless the team was literally giving away tickets for free to get people into the stadium just for the sheer optics of it, people weren't coming. And it got so bad that now they don't even sell the upper deck of the stadium anymore. Like, that's how bad the attendance has gotten in Edmonton, because they chased away all of those fans who, in all honesty, a lot of them had done more to build up this team than the previous management ever had. But now, all this time later, the managers have made that decision. They all got fired. Because, I mean, if you do something like that and you basically crater your fan base, well, then you fucked up pretty bad. You lose your job. Pro sports is a business. It's not it's not activism. It's not a charity. You either produce or you're gone. If you're a player, you either produce or you're gone. If you're in the boardroom, then you either produce results or you're gone. And that's what happened with that management. They basically came in, screwed it all up, probably so that they could go around bragging about like what they did with the team name here in Edmonton, when they went applying for jobs elsewhere. But they're not here anymore. They all got fired. And now there's new ownership. And so last year, the new ownership said that he might contemplate making a change back to the Eskimos name. And they haven't gone so far as to do that. But there has been a very interesting development here during the last week. And that was that the Edmonton Elks, and I will for the time being call them the Edmonton Elks, they hired back a guy by the name of Dwayne Mandruziac. If you're listening to this from anywhere outside of the Edmonton sports kind of region, you probably don't know who Dwayne Mandruziac pardon me, still alive. So you probably don't know who Dwayne Mandruziac is. But Dwayne Mandruziac was the longtime equipment manager of the Edmonton Eskimos. And he was Joey Moss's best friend. And so Joey Moss is probably more famous for his association with the Edmonton Oilers, but he's also very much associated with the Edmonton Eskimos. And in fact, the first time that I actually got to meet Joey Moss, it was at an Edmonton Eskimos fan day. And that was a very cool day to be able to actually talk to Joey Moss and shake his hand. And you try not to get too gushy with anybody. So you try not to get too gushy with him. But it was such a wonderful moment to actually meet him. And Dwayne Mandruziac was his best friend. And he used to stay with Dwayne Mandruziac like all the time during the season. In fact, like, as I understand it, like the day before game days, like Joey Moss would basically like stay overnight with Dwayne Mandruziac, and then they would go to the stadium together in the morning. And the Eskimos, or rather I should say the Edmonton Elks, they actually fired him. And they fired him under very controversial circumstances. People were very, very angry. And a lot of these people were people that were very, very angry, or at least somewhat resentful about the name change. And so that just drove more longtime fans away from the franchise and just kind of increased their struggles in that particular department. And so last week, they finally have righted that wrong and they rehired Dwayne Mandruziac. And when they brought back Dwayne Mandruziac, he brought back something that had kind of been taken away from, the Elks Eskimos organization. He brought back a sign that there had at one point being in the locker room, and it basically said, "Once an Eskimo, always an Eskimo." And so when they decided that that wasn't going to be true of the team anymore, they took that sign down and they sent it out of there with Dwayne Mandruziac. And now, all this time later, they have finally seen the error of that. I imagine there were always people in the organization that always knew the error of that. But now they've admitted the error of that, and they've corrected the error of that. And they have brought Dwayne Mandruziac back, and he has come back with that sign. And so it seems to me that, as I understand it, they're not necessarily going to make a full change back to the Eskimos name at this time. And honestly, they might not ever. But they are going to show a lot more respect for the Edmonton Eskimos name, the Edmonton Eskimos tradition, the Edmonton Eskimos history. And to me, that is very much a start. Because I used to be the biggest Edmonton Eskimos fan that there was. Okay, not quite the biggest. I know one bigger. But I was one of the biggest Edmonton Eskimos fans that there ever was. And I honestly felt like that organization, when they did the name change, if they had done it because the Inuit people were insistent upon it, then I could have accepted it. But the Inuit people were not insistent upon that. As a matter of fact, they were insistent upon the other thing. They said, "No, we want you to keep it." They did that to impress a bunch of people that were never going to buy tickets. They were never going to be fans. They're never going to support this franchise. They're just going to get what they want for the sake of their ego and then move on and then never come back again. And guess what? All of those people, they got what they wanted. They moved on. They never came back again. They have never spent a dime supporting this team. And now it's the team that's looking back at something that they gave up, something they lost, something that they left behind. Something that in losing that and leaving that behind and disrespecting it is definitely not anything that has done a thing to make this team or this franchise any better or any better off. And they decided to go back, and they're at least going to touch base with it. And to me, that's a huge difference maker. To actually, as a fan of that team, to have what the team has become come back and say, rather than basically saying it's like you were a racist for cheering "Go Eskimos Go" all those years. And all those years you were buying tickets and we were embarrassed because you were white. And there was actually a guy that was on their board of directors that said that and didn't get fired. Like there were no consequences for him for saying that. That's how far gone that organization was. But now instead of saying that, they're saying, we love and we respect that history. And we're going to show respect to that. And so they're going to show respect to all of the fans that so beloved that. To me, that is a huge difference maker. So I felt so insulted by what that franchise did that I haven't watched a minute of Edmonton Elks football. But this season, I might change my mind about that. If they keep moving in this direction and they keep just, even if they don't change their name, if they just show the appropriate amount of respect to the people that built this team up, that contributed to it, that supported it. The players that wore that name proudly for 70 years. That is enough to get me looking back in their direction and saying, you know what? Maybe I can come back to this team again. I'm not necessarily all the way back in. I mean, we'll have to see where they go from here because unfortunately there is some pressure to try to push them back the other way. And we saw that pretty early, earlier, later last year, I suppose it would have been, when they were talking about maybe even going back to the old name. And all of the people that had pushed so hard to make the name change, they just basically went into full court press again, and they were like, no, 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 you can't do that. You can't do that because it's not what I want. There was one guy with one of the Oilers podcast networks. I think his name was Tyler Yaremchuk, and I even saw this clip of him where he was sitting there saying, it's like, oh, this is so stupid. This is so stupid that we're talking about this. And it's like, well, Tyler, if it's stupid to talk about it now, then it was stupid to talk about it then. I guess the difference is that back then it was you being so stupid, and now you think that it's us. And I kind of feel like having actually contributed, like actually being a paying customer to that team for 20 years, more than 20 years. I kind of feel like maybe at this point when it's about my team, I kind of feel like I am entitled to be so stupid. If you felt like you were entitled to be so stupid all the way back then and force this thing, over all reason, over what any of the fans wanted, over what was actually good for the team, or even what was good for the Inuit people. Because I really hate to break this to you, imbeciles. But when you guys got the team to change its name, you basically got them to throw in the towel and say, yeah, okay, this word's an ethnic slur. It's akin to the, we'll almost treat it like it's akin to the N word, if that makes you happy. But it's like, yeah, you got what you wanted. You took the traditional name of a justifiably proud and noble people, and you turned it into a racial slur. That was their actual traditional name of those people for hundreds of years, generations upon generations, definitely more than 7. And you got your way. You got to turn it into an ethnic slur. Feel proud of yourself? Because it looks to me like now we're correcting that. We're turning it back the other way, and we're saying, you know what? No, it's not a bad word. No, it's not an insult to the Inuit people. This is the name of a group of people that we literally love in this country, and we're not going to let you turn that word into an insult. We're not going to let you turn their name into an insult. And I am proud of myself that we're accomplishing that. And if you don't like that, then I invite you to remember that what's so stupid was so stupid then every so much as you think it is now. So you can just go ahead and be so stupid by yourself somewhere else, and the rest of us are going to enjoy our football again.